a student came to a teacher and asked the teacher, "Please, I would like to learn from you." It was in an open field. The teacher was under a tree drinking some water. It was a beautiful sunny day. There were birds in the skies, you could hear them. And the teacher looked at the student and smiled. And then this is what the teacher did. The student said, "Stop. The cup is full." The teacher said, "Your mind is like this cup. Until you make space, how can I offer you anything?" That was some time ago. And that student was me. I went to medical school in Calcutta, India, about almost 3 decades ago. I remember my first day. Huge, white, imposing pillars of building built at the time of the British Raj. And the year I joined medical school, it turned 152 years old. In a funny way, I related to 152. Because 3 of my 4 grandparents were doctors. My father is a doctor. So I worked out, even before I entered medical school, I had 152 years worth of genetic medical experience. So in many ways, even before I sat for my first lecture, my cup was already half full. Over the next few years, I filled this cup further and further, all about health and more often about ill health. What makes my feet work, my hands, my body, the muscles, the bones, the organs, the lungs, the heart, the brain, the hair. What makes all of these things work and what makes them fail? I filled my cup with more things. Mental health. How do we as humans respond to sorrow, to anger, to desire? What are the ways in which we respond that makes us healthy, and more often, unhealthy? So my cup was quite full, and with this cup I traveled and spent time in Canada, spent time in the United States, spent time in Europe. And when my cup was pretty well full, I thought, yes, let's come to Leicester. And I thought, now I'm in Leicester, I'm a consultant, I'm pretty well sorted. My cup is all sorted, and yes, every so often there'll be a little bit of new evidence, so I'll just pour a bit out, fill that with the new evidence, change my practice a bit, but I'm pretty well sorted. And then I made the mistake of going back to university. University, which I think all of us have been part of, the University of Life. And life took this cup and it shook it. It shook it. I can see in this room people know what I'm talking about when our cups shake. And it's painful. And there isn't always a bucket to catch the water. It's hard. But after it settled, I found space. And in that space, I found 2 new dimensions of health that I had not previously considered. I knew about physical health and I knew about mental health. But then I found about social health. How does a person's position in society affect their health? More importantly, how do we affect the health of society? We're talking today about the health of the nation. How does what we consume as a society affect our health? And we could look at a simple level of alcohol, sugar, meat, vegetables, fruit, water. On a physical level, what are we consuming? What are our eyes consuming? What sort of images are we looking at? What do we watch on daytime television and the news? What are those images? What are the images in a park that we can also consume? Sunlight. What are we listening to? What sort of conversations are we engaged in as a society? How does that affect our health? We have a choice to be at TEDx. It's quite fascinating. And then I found a fourth dimension of health, which is spiritual health. What is it that gives our lives purpose? What is it that gives our lives meaning? Different people have described it in different ways, and technically, I guess that's what you call religion. But there's a common platform that I've found so far. Two things seem to be almost like a foundation. One is humility, or reverence, depends on how you look at it, that there is something bigger than me, humility. There is something that inspires awe, reverence for life. And the other thing I found was compassion. The ability to recognize somebody's distress and to take action to try and alleviate that distress. Compassion. I found these four dimensions of health. And then I began to realize that although there are four, they're actually one, like a compass. You have north, south, east, west, but it's the same compass, all coming from the same center. And then I started finding out how these different types of health interact with each other, how one can compensate for gaps in the other, how a physical limitation can be overcome by mental strength. Every 4 years we see it in the Paralympics. Power of mind overcoming physical illness. I know of 2 people who have walked their way out of depression. Physically walked. Medical science had given up on them. They walked their way out of depression. You can call it meditative walking, you can call it mindful walking, but they physically walked out of a mental health problem. I did a rheumatology job, and I had a patient, an elderly lady, who I was seeing in clinic. And as you do in clinic, you kind of look at the x-rays and the blood tests and things before the person comes in. I looked at her x-rays and I thought, there's no hope this lady can move any of her joints. There was no radiological way those joints would move. And then she comes in, and very pleasant, inspiring lady, and she told me how she volunteered at the WRVS in the hospital. I was quite junior, I didn't quite believe her. But after the clinic ended, I went there and she was working. And it was amazing because I knew what her joints looked like in the x-rays, and there she was, serving coffee, managing somehow to get the buns on, managing to operate the till. And it gave me that memory that I later found out that social health can overcome physical illness. But what I really would like to share with you is the information, the joy I found in learning about compassion. All sorts of wonderful things. I found that compassion lights up the centers in our brain that are referred to as the pleasure centers. And that's work done by the National Institute of Health. I found that Stony Brook and University of Michigan have found that people who are engaged in compassionate behaviors live longer, healthier lives, and recover from illnesses and injuries quicker. UCLA and the University of North Carolina have gone further to try and explore why this may be the case. And they've looked at 2 groups of people. People with hedonic happiness, the happiness that comes from focusing on yourself, and eudaimonic happiness, the happiness that comes from focusing on others. And they looked at their biological markers of inflammation, the a reaction that heals us, but also causes us to age. And they found those people engaged in compassionate lifestyles, compassionate work, focused on others, had lower levels of inflammation. And then I found this work has been done elsewhere. It's not just in the United States, the Planck Institute in Germany, the University of British Columbia in Canada. It's fascinating work. And then I found they've extended this. Harvard, NYU, and University of California have actually shown that compassion at the top of an organization is contagious. That the workers pick that up. That it increases commitment. It increases productivity. Potentially, it can improve the financial health of an organization. I got quite excited with all of this, and then I decided I had to stop. I stopped because I recognized I was going back to my old habit of filling the cup, and filling it and filling it. So I stopped. And I asked, what can I do with my hands instead of filling my head? How can I provide compassionate care in an emergency department that is overstretched with too many patients and not enough resources? But even in that space, what is the best I can do? Many of my colleagues I work with, their cups are full. There's no space, I can tell you. How can I find compassion in myself for them? Some of my colleagues have space. How can I find the courage to join them? To be the lone nut we spoke about, or to be the first follower of the lone nut? But that courage and compassion brings that. Then the toughest element of compassion, self-compassion. Can I find the ability to forgive myself for the mistakes I make? Can I find the ability to take joy in the things I do well? So really what I would like to share is I found there is another way. There is another way, and that's really the message I would like to share with you. Before I go, I would like to end with the story I began with about the teacher. The teacher offered something to me, and I would now like to offer it to you. What my teacher shared with me, and I now share with you, he said to me, there is no way to compassion. Compassion is the way. Thank you.